Okay, so you want to be the most successful at something. Then go and do it. If you want to be the best writer, start writing. You want to be the best photographer, then start taking pictures. The story in this episode is that of a man who dreamt the impossible and did it anyway. It was called the artistic crime of the century. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Okay, hi, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, I'm just going to do some shout outs quickly. And if you listen, later on I'm going to talk about a little podcast competition I'm going to run. But I'll tell you about that after the story. Okay, let's get on with it. Shout outs to David Thompson, listening in New Zealand. Hey David, thank you for getting in touch, for your lovely messages. Kim Kotarski, hope I've said that okay, Kim. Kim sent me a message on Facebook. Hey Kim. And Susan Barrett. Thank you, Susan, for listening. Cheers if you've got in touch in any way. Communication tends to kind of come at me in all different directions. So if you want to email me or you want to get me on Twitter or Instagram, you can feel free to slide into my DMs. That's okay. I know sometimes people don't want to necessarily do things publicly. They would prefer to send me private messages. That's okay. I'm hearing this as I'm saying it and I'm realising it's starting to sound dodgy. That's not what I mean. I'm just meaning people would like to sometimes communicate with me privately. Again, that's just making it all sound dodgy. You know what I'm saying. Just get in touch with me. Alright, Barry? Get the fuck on with it. Are you ready? Okay. Let's go. Let's start with the possibly two most famous buildings that have ever been built. The Twin Towers. So they were built in 1973 and they were the highest buildings in the world. They stood at an incredible 1,368 feet in lower Manhattan, New York. Now this story, it's not about 9/11 and it's not about those attacks. It's a story of what happened 2 years after the buildings had been constructed and how one man managed to completely make himself incredibly famous by disrupting what those buildings were. In brief, and of course there is so much more here, but just briefly, I mean, the towers were built, well, they were built as a symbol of America's belief in itself, where it stood economically at that moment when things were tough. America decided it was going to build these two huge, tallest buildings in the world, and they stood for a symbol of we can prosper. We believe that we can be better. We can be a superpower. That's a really condensed way to put that. I know that the Twin Towers stood for a lot more. I understand that. But that's it kind of in a nutshell. So construction of the towers started in 1965. And by 1973, they were almost near completion. They were almost finished. Sorry, any American listeners who think that I might have, or any listeners who think that I might have skipped over the significance of the towers. I haven't. It just so happens that the story that I'm going to tell happens in the 1970s, and I just need to sort of establish the towers rather than talk about the demise of them and what happened to them later. Right, let's leave New York and go to France. Ah oui oui. So in France, we have a man called Philippe Petit. And Philippe was working hard from a young age on his physical agility, and he was perfecting his circus skills. Philippe was born in... Now, my French is awful. I didn't do French at school, so he was born in... It's a northerly part of France. Seine-et-Marne. No, that's actually just rubbish. Hang on, give me 1 second. He was born in...
Seine-et-Marne.
There we go. Thank you, YouTube. Seine-et-Marne, France. So, the Petit family are about to give birth to a son. A boy who at a young age just loved to climb things. He loved to get into like small spaces. A really physical child. You know, one of these ones that's just trying to always get to the top of something or climb over an impossible fence or, that kind of thing. That kind of child. As a teenager, Philippe discovered magic tricks, and boy oh boy did he love them. He also fell in love with juggling. Great. So I mean, it looks like it's going to be a pretty clowny kind of life for Philippe here. So as I said earlier on, he absolutely loved to climb and he loved heights. And at about the age of 15, I think, he had his first go on a tightrope wire and he fell in love with it. Now, he was extremely skilled at it instantly. He was fearless, absolutely fearless, and really talented. He took the study of tightrope walking incredibly seriously. I mean, I guess you'd have to, because otherwise you'd just be some sort of idiot who just kept falling off of it. And this is not what Philippe was. He practiced every day, and he was always wanting to really, really challenge himself. This is where I really respect Philippe. He never settled with just being good at anything. He wanted to be the best, the biggest. So yeah, he was a great juggler. Yes, he was a great tightrope walker. Yes, he was great at all these things, but he was like, yeah, being great's okay. I want to be the best at it. I want to do it on the biggest scale that is possible. He said of tightrope walking, within 1 year, I taught myself to do all the things that you can do on a wire. I learned the backwards somersault, the front somersault, the unicycle, the bicycle, sitting on a chair and jumping through hoops. I mean, I didn't even know you could do some of those on a tightrope, but yep, Philippe taught himself all these things. I mean, that is some seriously mad skills that he has got there. But here's the thing. Philippe thought the actual act of doing these things, jumping through hoops, being able to somersault on a wire, in his own words, he thought it was a bit ugly. And he wanted to create something more beautiful with his tightrope skills. For Philippe, there was no art in it. It was just a skill. And for him, that equated boring. I kind of know exactly what Philippe is talking about here. And I don't know if maybe this is what's drawn me to this story. Well, the fact that he's one completely unique man, completely extraordinary. I think the other thing that might have drawn me here is years and years ago, this is going to sound ridiculous, I used to work for a company who specialised in circus acts. And I had a boss at the time who I didn't have a great relationship with this boss, but he had a very, very clear vision about one thing. And that was always, he said, it doesn't matter if you've got the best gymnast in the world. It doesn't matter if you've got the best juggler. It doesn't matter if you've got the best stilt walker. If basically all that they're ever doing is displaying their skill, then it's boring. It's just dull to watch. It's entertaining for about 10 seconds at the most, and then it just gets really boring. There's no content in it. There's no artistry to it. And I think that's where Philippe was coming from at this point. He was like, yeah, great, I can walk the tightrope, I can do all these things, but it's not that interesting because all I'm doing is displaying the skill. I want the skill elevated. I think this is what he's saying. I want the skill elevated up to another level. I want to make art with what I'm doing. So here's what he does. In 1971, Philippe secretly installs a cable wire between the two towers of Notre Dame in Paris, and he goes walking on his tightrope. So one day the people of Paris are just going about their day, probably riding on a bicycle, eating a baguette, wearing a beret. I'm kidding on. And they look up and they see this man, and here he is. He's up on Notre Dame, one of Paris's most famous buildings. And they see him, and he's up there, and he's on his wire, and he's juggling balls. He's dancing up and down on the wire. People are applauding, and they love it. I would absolutely love it if I was on my way to work and saw that. So that's all well and good. And Philippe is living in Paris. But he's got a yearning for another place. And that place is New York. He collected photos of the city, and he'd become obsessed by the structures and the buildings that existed in New York. So he takes himself to New York in 1972, age 26. When he gets there, he says his first impressions were, it was cold, it was dirty, it was full of skyscrapers, and I loved it. Or as he says in the interview I listened to, I loved it. Now, there is one particular set of buildings Philippe had his eye on, and what might they be? The Twin Towers. Now, he had a plan forming in his mind. He wanted to tightrope walk between the two towers. Now, the towers were still undergoing construction. They weren't finished yet. They were nearing the end. They were nearing being ready. But there weren't any people working in the building yet. They were almost there. But it just needed, there was a few more bits to do. So, this is interesting. Philip gets to New York, right? He's really excited. He's like, I've got this plan. I've got this idea. This is what I really want to do. And when he's just in New York, he takes the subway one night across New York to where the towers are because he wants to see them up close. I'd only ever seen pictures of them. And suddenly gets out that subway, goes to where they are, and he gets hit by an, oh, shit, I can't do this. He's hit by a, whoa, they are so much bigger in real life than I actually thought that they were. He said then, at that moment, his dream began to completely disappear. He was so massively overwhelmed by their scale. I think anyone who's been anywhere in the world, you understand that feeling. I certainly understand it. I went to New York at the start of the year, and yet there's loads of buildings in New York that I was thinking, I've seen this a million times in movies, in pictures, and suddenly when you're in front of it, you go, oh my God, it's just completely different. There's a famous building in London that's built in the shape of a mobile phone. And I'd seen so many images of this, but when someone pointed it out to me, I literally couldn't stop staring at it. Because just when you see it there, you go, whoa, when you see it for real. So Philippe, he's starting to worry now because he thinks, well, I've come to New York. This was my plan. And he says that in his brain, he's thinking to himself, it's impossible. Okay? I'll do it. Love that. I love that he's like, it's absolutely not possible. I'm just going to do it. So this is what Philippe does. He gets inside the building that night, that same night, for the first time that he's seen them. Well, obviously security can't have been that wonderful in 1974. So he starts to climb up to the top, and he just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. I mean, essentially it's a building site at this point. There's no people in it. So he gets to the top, he thinks about it, contemplates, and then he comes back down. And that's when he decides that absolutely, yes, he is going to go 100% ahead with his plan. Yes, Philippe, you are living your best life right there in that moment. And so for the next 8 months, this is what Philippe Petit does. He plans what would be known as the artistic crime of the century. He and a photographer friend begin to sneak into the towers at night, and what they would do is hide in small spaces, undetected by any security. And when they were sure it was safe, they would go to the roof and they would make their plans. Now this included them drawing diagrams of how the stunt might go, what they would need. They photographed all the places that a cable could be and possibly would be attached, and they considered how would they ensure that a cable between the two buildings would be strong enough to hold Philippe's weight. I love this, they got fake ID cards made, and they pretended to be from a construction team who needed access to the roof. So they got to a point where every day security were going, oh yeah, it's that construction firm who are working on the roof, let's let them go up. But actually there was no work going on up there. All that was happening was they were up there plotting and planning how might they make this happen. I mean, if you're going to go for something, you might as well just go full balls to the wall on it and lie. There's no, just do it. They built models of the towers at home, and they worked out every tiny structural detail of how to do it. Philippe says, in those 8 months, it was like I married those towers. I spent all my time with them and thinking about them. So along the way, Philippe had gathered a small team of people to help him. I mean, this could never have been a one-man job, of course. So he had a few friends, a photographer, a couple of jugglers, and a few artist friends to help him. Now, they had some really frustrating setbacks along the way. They had to stop a couple of times and wonder, would this ever fucking happen? Was it ever actually going to be possible? At one point, they're caught by police at night and they have to abandon the mission. They planned 2 different days for the secret event to happen, and on the days when they went to do it, the weather got in the way and it had to be abandoned. But after 8 long months of working in secret, the time finally arrived. So it's 6 o'clock in the evening on the 6th of August 1974. Philippe and 2 of his team, they posed as delivery men. They got into the South Tower armed with what they needed. And another team did the exact same in the North Tower, and both teams got to the top. So what they had with them was the massive steel cable that would connect the two towers. This detail I absolutely love. How were they going to get the cable from one tower to the other? So Philippe's in the South Tower right now, and he wants to send it over to the North. Well, a bow and arrow is how they did it. An actual bow and arrow. Philippe himself said that at the time when they were planning it, he thought this was a ridiculous idea. I mean, it doesn't sound exactly like the greatest idea, but you know what? Hey, it worked. The wire was fired across to the other team, and the teams worked all through the night to connect from the south to the north, that wire, and get it absolutely secured. How scared would you be at that moment right there? I mean, I know that there's been 8 months of sneaking in, hiding, pretending you work there, trying to do this, building models. But in that moment when you're actually that close to it, I think that must be the most terrifying bit, because you're like, if we get caught now, we're fucked. This whole thing is over. But maybe that's the genius of this. Maybe that's the genius of this, because you're doing it at the highest point of the city. I mean, you're not necessarily walking around your city at night thinking, I must check the rooftops for crime. I must check the highest point of the city. Well, you're not really doing that. So maybe that's the genius of it. So 7 a.m. the following morning, the time has finally come. The work is done. The months of preparation. Philippe is about to realise his dream. He's about to walk the 134-foot distance between those two towers on a high wire. There's a lovely moment when he's talking and he describes having 1 foot on the wire and 1 foot on the tower. And he describes that in that moment he realises it's now or never. And off he goes. Now he's not wearing a harness. All that he has is a balancing stick. And he starts his journey. Is there a safety net in the street? Is there fuck? But what there is in the street is a crowd of people who've started to gather to watch this. So people on their way to work, they look up and all of a sudden they can't believe what they're seeing above them. There's a man walking between the two towers. Nearly, get this, 100,000 people gathered below the wire to watch Philippe. And he can hear them chanting and applauding. And do you know what he does? He starts to perform for them. He starts doing all these things where he's like going down on one knee. He's bending his body to salute the buildings. At one point he lies across the wire. Alright, I mean, now he's just showing off. I mean, no one likes a show off, Philippe. I'm kidding. If I had those skills, I'd be doing the exact same thing. I'm kidding. I wouldn't. Well, no, I would. Actually, I think I probably would do that kind of thing. No, but I don't really have a fear of heights. But what I do have, and some of you will be aware of this, I have a real fear of birds. So my worry would be, when I was looking at this story, I was like, see, I wouldn't be scared up there. But if a bird came anywhere near me, I would be fucking jumping off that wire instantly. I'd be right out of town. I'd be like, see you later, because that would be my fear. So for 45 minutes, Philippe walks back and forth. He manages that journey 8 times. Police are called and they're dispatched to the roof of the tower. So the officers, right, they get to the top and they're looking right at Philippe. And Philippe, balls of steel, just starts to laugh at the police. and he actually starts dancing on the wire. And the police have no clue what to do. The only thing that they can do is threaten to send in a helicopter. But this doesn't stop Philippe. I mean, come on, you've spent 8 months planning this. It's been your dream to do this. Do you think the threat of a helicopter is going to stop you? I don't think so. He lies down on the wire again. He starts more of his antics. But then after 45 minutes, he must have been exhausted. He begins to think, do you know what? I've achieved the dream. I've done what I wanted. I've absolutely fulfilled my dream of walking on a wire between these two towers. So he starts to move back towards the south tower where he started. When he gets there and he's safely on the rooftop, police descend on him and he's dragged away. He's put into handcuffs and he's taken to a police station. Unbelievably, he is charged with 14 different crimes. I'm not even going to read you all 14 because they're utterly ridiculous, but there's things in there like disobeying the police is one of them. Trespassing. Brilliantly, this is one of the charges. Performing without a permit. Right, okay, yeah, sure, I can really see Philippe trying to get a permit to do that months before. I mean, can you imagine the person who works in the performance permits office? That comes across your desk. You'd be like, okay, right, so there's some crazy who says he wants to put a tightrope between the two buildings and walk between them. No thanks. So actually, yeah, charge him with it. That's just stupid. Reporters and the public and those who had watched him up there absolutely loved him. They just thought this man was amazing. He's asked he comes down, and at one point as he's going to the police station, reporters gather round him and they're all firing a million questions at him. And one of the New York newspapers puts a microphone in his face and says, "Have you ever fallen from a great height?" And he just sort of looks at the reporter and says, "Well, no. I wouldn't be here if I had." He then says, "You need dreams to live. It is as essential as bread. I would have died if this dream had been taken away from me. I would have died if it had been taken away from me because of reason or logic." So the president of the Twin Towers at the time went to the judge who was due to sit during Philippe's court case, and he pleaded with him to drop the charges. He said, "Look, Judge, can we just," I'm sure he didn't say it, "Look, Judge whoever, can we just let this go? I mean, there's no real damage done here. You know, let's let the guy off." And the judge agrees. So the charges are dropped. And instead of prison or a fine, Philippe was ordered to perform in Central Park for the public. And he did. Philippe carried on his life doing stunts, but nothing ever, again, quite on the scale of the Twin Towers. He's still alive, and he's living in New York with his wife, and he's now 69 years old. And I'll end this story with what I think is my favourite of Philippe Petit's quotes. "It's impossible. Okay, I'll do it." And so ends the story of Philippe Petit. Good on you, Philippe. Dream your dream. Live your life. Do what you want to do. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm almost out of here. I just want to remind you that you can still vote for Extraordinary Stories podcast to be a nominee in the Listener's Choice category at the UK British Podcast Awards. The link is quite easy to find, so if you would like to do that, that would be marvellous. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on email. Of course, the Facebook group. Join the group, like the page, get involved. One final thing just before I go. It's competition time. So, in the next little while, I'll be putting out merchandise and I'm looking for your ideas, your best ideas, your thoughts, your suggestions. What would you like to see? I mean, I think last week someone suggested men's underwear, but I'm not sure that that's a goer. But you know, I'm open to everything. I'm open to suggestions. So I'm going to set up a thread on the Facebook group, and I'll also do this on all other social medias. And I'm going to invite you to tell me what kind of things would you like? Do you want something with something written on it? Do you want images? What's your thoughts? What's your ideas? Go nuts, go crazy. Send me your fucking wildest ideas. Like, this is really strange, right? I'll just give you this small example. So I had a request recently by personal email for an MP3 version of the opening music with Shouty Man, so that someone could use it as a ringtone. And then I saw a few people popping up going, oh, I just really wish that I could buy the ringtone and whatever. You don't have to buy the ringtone. Don't be silly. That's fine. I'll give that away. That's, you know, if you want that as your music for your phone, that's fine. You don't have to do that. I'll give that away. But I quite like that idea that I was like, I could give away bits of that, bits of anything, really. But also, hit me. Be creative. So I'm going to let this roll until the 4th of May, just over a week. And I'm going to pick from it 3 ideas that I love. And those 3 ideas, those winners, you will get the following: an Extraordinary Stories podcast mug. There are only 2 in the world at the moment, and it's a really nice mug. I won't lie, it's really nice. You'll get badges, you'll get stickers, you'll get a letter written by my own fair hand, you'll get a shout out on the podcast, and you will also get a short episode that I will record just for you. So, get in touch, let me know your thoughts. I can't wait to hear them. Okay, until the weekend. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.
As a teenager, Philippe, not Philippe, his name's not Philippe. Oh my god, Betty.
Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.